Welcome back to Ideally Crazy, the podcast that helps you see yourself through God's eyes. Through the testimonies of sisters and brothers meant to encourage you as you walk toward the harvest and the promises God has for your life. It's your host, Rachel Haskins. It's Rachel Haskins with Ideally Crazy, and today I have another special guest,
Jarrell Badger, pastor of Greater Grace Christian Fellowship.
Yes, this is Pastor Jarrell Badger, and I'm going to refer to him as Jarrell. I did ask him before, and he said it was okay, so it's still in respect. But I know Mr. Jarrell I don't really know him, but he's a musician. You guys know that my daddy's a musician, so I've seen him in past, and we haven't had much conversation. But you know how my church is like. I used to go to a Kojic church, and so there's a lot of churches like that, and so we come together. We have all type of different meetings, and the music department in this house is a huge thing. So I would see a lot of different musicians in the past, but I noticed that he had recently started his church, and I definitely wanted to get him on because that's a different step, that's a different avenue, and you guys know I always say Ideally Crazy is about seeing yourself through God's eyes. And so anytime you take a leap of faith, then that's part of your journey and God's vision for you. And so I definitely wanted to bring him on today. I'm going to let him tell you a little bit more about himself because I always say, he knows more about him than I do.
Well, I'm originally from Long Branch, New Jersey, moved to Hardin County, Kentucky.
Okay.
And that's where my mom was an associate minister at a AME church there. And that's where we met Elder Donald Cook.
Okay. Okay.
Elder Donald Cook. And so he, of course, recognized my talents and gifts. And he's the one that brought me into the Church of God in Christ. Okay. And so that growing up, my uncle was a bishop in New Jersey and of the Church of God. And so it's all kind of the same thing.
It really is.
The
Church of God, if I'm right, it is still Pentecostal.
Yes, correct.
So,
correct.
we're sister churches.
Yeah. And so I believe Church of God split from Church of God in Christ. And so, so that's how I was introduced to the Church of God in Christ and began traveling with him. Supporting his ministry.
I do know Brother Donnie Cook. He rest in peace. He has passed since.
Yes.
But he was before my dad was the minister of music over Kentucky, the first jurisdiction of Kentucky. Donnie Cook was.
Yeah.
And he was also some of my childhood friends, uncle or cousin, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So and his family actually went to our church.
That's right.
So I know them well. If you know any of the Cooks or the the Knoxes? That is like the family. They're a huge family in Louisville, Kentucky.
Absolutely.
So that's dope. So you guys know how I do. I jump right into my questions. So the first question is childhood roots. When you think back to your childhood, what experiences or people do you believe most shaped your faith and the man you are today?
Well, as I mentioned, my great uncle was he was not only our pastor and bishop, but he was a musician. I watched him preach. I watched him play. I watched him work on the boiler of the church. And so he was very, I called him growing up, he was my superhero. And so they look up to Kobe Bryant, they look up to different ones. And so who I looked up to most was my great uncle and my mom. Absolutely. My mom, she shaped me a whole lot. My mom, being a single mother.
Absolutely.
A lot of times it felt like she was playing both roles. And so my mom really shaped me and kept me around the church, even when I tried to drift off and wanted to do my own things. And so my mom was the one that snatched me back.
Absolutely.
And so, and then different mentors that came into my life, including your father. Musically also that I watched. I didn't just watch them musically. I watched them how they handled their families and things as well. So.
I completely understand what you're saying. I always say that with my role models are always going to be people that I know. And then I can give people credit and honor where it's due for their work ethic, but I'm a person that base what I think off of, and not judge anybody, but if I want to be like somebody, I care about how their character. Because you'll see some people accomplish things, but who in exchange they exchange their integrity.
Absolutely.
They don't have any morals, and that's never been the type of person I want to be. Just like you said, because of the people that raised me. My mother, I can truly say that my mother is a virtuous woman, and she's always lived that way in front of me. And so I always, I didn't measure all the way up to my mom. But as far as who I am morally and my belief system and my integrity, it definitely is online with my mother because,
Absolutely.
that's what I was raised, and anything outside of that doesn't feel natural
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah.
And so I completely understand what you're saying about that. And then even with the mother role, I'm a single mother.
Yeah.
So I have my son, and his dad has always played an active role in his life. But some things I think men are like, he gonna have to learn the hard way.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Mom was like, not my
Yeah.
baby.
Yeah.
And that's why I said, honey, I know I words the Lord about him. Because I mean, like I tell you, anytime he crosses my mind, I'm praying for my baby. And I speak over him because a lot of times as mothers we are who help form who our children's gonna be. We're there with them all the time.
Absolutely.
That's what my daddy said with my mom. So you know how your daddy's always like, go ask your mama.
Yeah.
Because your mom knows, like when you ask him, can you go somewhere? If you really going where you going.
She knows the details.
She knows the details. She's like,
Yeah.
honey, she ain't never asked. We don't know them now. And I always knew that he was going to send me right back to her.
Absolutely.
And she was going to make the right decision. So I always say that it works two-handed. But as a single mom, I would like, there are some things I would run past his dad. But if his dad was a hard no, or his dad had given instructions, I never went against his dad.
Yeah.
Because even though we lived in separate households, I knew that there's a part that
Absolutely.
I did not understand
Absolutely.
or that I did not know about and he knew about. And so, but like on the, like we ruled kind of with a different hand. Like I said, he'll be like, well, he's going to have to learn. I'm like, no, Lord.
Yeah.
Look, I told my mom, but I was talking about my mother the other day, and I said, I remember there was a period, and every morning at 3:00 in the morning, the Lord was having me roll on my knees and pray for him. And
Wow.
and I was like, Lord, how long is it going? And I don't even know how I knew what to do. You know how you just wake up and you know what to do.
Yeah.
I would get down on my knees, and then I remember when it broke. But I said after that, I said, Lord, I've done what you asked me to do. All I can do is give it to you. And it's not that your children are always going to go the path that you want them to be, but when I tell you God keeps them in line.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just me praying. I also had other actions. I took him to church. You know what I'm saying? Because prayer without works is dead in any situation.
Absolutely.
So, here it is that you want God to save him at 17. Start taking him to church. So from the time my son was born, we had him in the church. We had him in programs because life is going to happen. But the Bible says if you raise them up the way that they should go, if you train them the way that they should go, that they wouldn't depart. That doesn't mean that they're not going to live life because you lived life a little bit. But they'll remember where their start was. And I always say the best thing my parents gave me was God. Because when I wasn't always doing right, I knew where to run to get it right.
Absolutely.
I knew where my true salvation was. And so that's what you give them by going to church. That's what you give them by putting them in programs, and not just church programs, because sometimes we want to stop there. Your children are going to have to compete in the world. I always say this. I use this scripture a lot, and I know y'all like, why do y'all not, Rachel, why do you not know the number on these people that Elijah had, the guy told Elijah that he had? It was somewhere around 7,000, y'all. But he said to Elijah, I have 7,000 that have not bowed to Baal, which means they were his men.
Yeah.
And so what I said is this: what you have to understand, wherever the devil is, and he's everywhere, God should have some people there too.
Yeah.
So that's going to be in positions of politics. That's going to be in positions of leadership.
Yeah.
Because you need people that have integrity and have a higher system that they pray to. Because I always say when I go into the hospital, I say I don't work for the hospital.
Yeah.
They might be who pays me, but who provides for me is God. My boss is God.
Yeah.
So even in my businesses, I make sure that I do them with integrity, because I know who my boss is, and if he shuts a door, can't nobody open it. If he opens a door, can't nobody close it. You hear me? And so even when I'm dealing with different things, I always remember, and like you said, my mother is the one who always had us in the program.
Absolutely.
She was the one. She was in children's church with us, so she would hold positions in children. I talked to you guys about how she was that PTA mom, always up at the school. She was always doing stuff with the local church, but she didn't stop there. If we was in children's church in the national church, guess what? That's where she was, working and serving there. So mothers, when you can. Now, like I said, my mother didn't have to work for a while, so there was things that she was able to do. But if you can, do what you can, and if you want more, ask God to help you give you the capacity to do more. And sometimes that might look like entrepreneurship, where you have a little bit more freedom. Go ahead, feel free asking God for what you want. You might not know how that's going to turn out or what that's going to look like, but God is able to give you the life that you want. And to me, that's what I call my promised land. So as long as you work within him and you do things unto him, and do it the way that you want. Don't give God anything, but do it unto him. Then you can, and it's going to help somebody else. He will find a way for you to have the desires of your heart. And that is where your promised land resides. So we'll move on to the second question.
I see.
Do you want cut me off anytime? You want to say okay.
Yep.
Faith and calling. Can you share your church background and the moment you realized God was calling you not just to ministry, but to lead and plant a church?
Well, that is a fourfold question. So church background, as I stated, I grew up in Church of God, but my grandmother, which was actually my mom's godmom, but she actually helped raise me. And so we grew up calling her grandma. And she raised my oldest sister. And she was Baptist.
Okay.
So I had the Baptist, the Pentecostal. My mom was apostolic. Then we moved to Kentucky. My mom was Methodist.
Okay.
Then Elder Cook, Church of God in Christ. And
Okay.
so the unique thing about our church is we consider it to be an interdenominational church, where we kind of pull from each traditional background, if you will. You know, so on a Sunday, you never know what you're going to get. But to the question of how did I know when God was calling me to preach? Since I was, calling me to pastor specifically. Since I was 7, God dealt with me with dreams.
Okay.
And he would show me what I was doing. He showed me being a minister of music. He showed me playing. A lot of things God would give me, he still does, give me songs in my sleep. And so I write and produce from that perspective. But one particular time in my life, not long ago, it was very public. I went through a divorce and it was very taxing on the mind. And I found myself in Central State Hospital. Yeah, Central State Hospital. And I never forget it because I was in that moment where I heard the Lord in the shower. I was praying and I heard the Lord say, "Feed my sheep." And I looked around like,
you knew what he meant, though.
yeah. Well, you know, it's like, well, you're in Central State, so you're kind of like, am I going crazy?
There's nowhere to
And
go.
recently, I preached a message the Lord gave me. You're not crazy. You're called. You're not crazy. Kind of going back to Samuel's experience when he was hearing the Lord call him, but he did not recognize, he did not know his voice. He had to be taught his voice. And so again, they was telling me I couldn't be released until I take the medication. And they kept trying to diagnose me with being bipolar. And I heard the Lord again he said, "Feed my sheep." This time I responded with, "Yes, Lord."
Lord, I'm telling
When
you.
I responded with, "Yes, Lord," they came back, said, "You're not bipolar and we're discharging you." And so that's when I realized that God had took me through everything I had went through at that time to get me to a place to get a yes. Because I was comfortable sitting behind the organ. I was comfortable being number one at being number two, helping somebody else build their vision as I helped others, plant churches and things. And so it was in that moment that I knew God was calling me to the front to lead and know for a fact that when I hear his voice, I'm hearing directly from him.
When I tell you, part of that's my testimony.
Wow.
And so many people that are not just chosen, but like you said, called.
Yeah.
When you said dream, he talks to me in
Yeah.
dreams. But what happened was when I started getting on my spiritual journey is because I believed in God. I believed in everything the Bible said.
Absolutely.
I grew up Kojic, but I didn't know it, but I didn't have a real, I had a relationship, but not where I knew him. You know what I'm saying? Where I knew my father. And so, during COVID, when he got me by myself, because that's what I heard.
Wow.
He will get you by yourself so that he knows you hear him. And when you hear him, to somebody else, the message may not make sense, but you know, and how you know it's God is because you know exactly what he means.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times, the reason why we've driven, I said, because when I was going through COVID, I was a little anxious baby.
Yeah.
I don't cook on the regular, y'all. I'm just going to be honest with y'all. I was cooking 3 times a day. I had the children. I was wearing everybody out. We was going to be productive because if I was going to be in that house, we was going to be productive.
Absolutely.
I was going over the list. I remember one time I was sitting up to 4 o'clock in the morning and learning how to do a math problem so that I could help my son do the next day. And it was wearing everybody out. Okay. And I said, you know what? I just rested one day. And I went in my prayer closet and he said, start talking to me about things and what he was going to have me to do. And a lot of times he'll show you something in the future. And you'd be like, well, Lord, how?
A glimpse. Yeah.
The Lord, how? And you'll hear him, but you're not sure. And then sometimes I always say, play with God. I'd be like, Lord, I remember. You hear me?
Give me a sign.
Give me a sign.
Give me a sign.
I was over a family member's house. We had went over for game night.
Okay.
And I said, Lord, if you said what I didn't say it out loud.
Yep.
That's why I didn't say it out loud. I said, if it was you that I heard, I said, "Whoo!" And I never forget. I said, "If it was you that I heard, and I was not wrong about it, because
Yeah.
sometimes you question, are you crazy? Are you called? You hear me?
Yeah,
Are you
are you?
crazy?
Yeah.
You questioning it? Are you crazy?" That's why I said the people that just know, be careful. Those are probably false witnesses. But most of
Yeah.
us, we are kind of confused, and we know because there's a peace, but
Yeah.
we'll ask them over and over, because we don't even ask them just once. We ask them over and
Absolutely.
over and over
Absolutely.
again. We always go back to the Lord. And we were playing a game, and I was so far back in the game. But I said, Lord, I said, if you're going to do what you told me you're going to do, all the stuff I had seen in the dreams, the things you
Yeah.
told me you was going to do, I said, let me win this game.
Mm.
I was so far. Everybody else had got on the board of the game. I hadn't even got on the board.
Okay.
I rolled. We weren't playing dice, but the game was involved. I can tell you, the game we was playing involved dice. I rolled the numbers that I rolled. I think I rolled 5s on both dices.
Wow.
And I instantly won the game.
Wow.
And I said, because when he answers, when you're asking God for something, that's another thing. Be looking for an answer.
Yeah.
I don't know if so much as how
Be prepared for the answer.
He was building my self-esteem too, because sometimes when you first get to know him, like your self-esteem is like, well, God, if you know, like I didn't say it out loud, but
build that confidence.
like who am I to even ask you?
Yeah.
And so he builds your confidence, like get to know me as your father. Like when I don't play about you, and he'll do it. But he say everything he does, the way he does it, so he gets the glory.
Yeah.
There was no way that I was gonna win that game. We was, I don't know how many rounds in, and I hadn't even got in the game because I just kept messing up.
Absolutely.
And then the next thing, one quick roll, and I had beat everybody.
Jesus.
I had ended up the head of everybody. I was like, thank you. And my cousin said, she said, you weren't even paying attention. Wow. I said, I know it. And I laughed because I knew it, how they was going on about the game, but I knew what it was to me because nobody had heard my inner thoughts. Yeah. But a lot of times when you're hearing from God, especially even on your journey, just like Noah, I always refer to Noah. Noah was building a boat for a storm, and they hadn't even had rain before. Do you know how crazy that had to seem? Not just to him, but not just to the community, but even his family. Yeah. That was abnormal to his family, because why are we building for a storm that's going to take out the world, and we don't even have rain? What is rain?
The bishop that I work for, he often says Noah looked like a fool until it began to rain.
Until it began to rain. And that's how it works. And so even when you're working on stuff, keep working. Yeah. Because you look silly. And they're like, well, who is this? What is she doing? I heard, like, when I was doing Dilly Crazy, you hear all kind of stuff. Like, she wants attention, but I don't have to want attention. Everywhere honey, I got a light. I always have. Everywhere I go, I get it. You understand what I'm saying? So this was a calling of God. But then I was leaving church the other day, and one of the ushers, as I was leaving, she said, girl, I listen to your podcast all the time. So God is sending little people, and not little people, but people to keep encouraging you to do what you're doing. You hearing me right? Because he knows what I need to hear. Because I'm like, do I need to put more attention here? Because one thing Rachel's going to do, she's going to build. And so I'll be looking at, let me know it's working. Keep doing it. And even my purpose behind it. So you guys know that I'm having my community wellness fair that is coming up on March 28th. It'll be from 1 to 4. Special guest speakers from 1 to 2:30. But it was so important that I do that because my mom was on the prayer line all the time.
Wow.
And on the prayer line, not that I'm snooting in, but I'm coming in and coming out, and she's old. She got it on speakerphone. Yeah. Everybody's sick. Nurses believe in preventative care. Okay. And then there's a lot of things coming with these Medicare changes. People are going to have to start they're going to lose coverage, which means they're going to have to start using the emergency room like you would use a primary care office. And so guess what the wait times are going to start looking like? Jesus. You talking about hours. You can go for days. If you have something that's minor, and you know how I said we go in an ABC manner, airway, breathing, circulation, that's how we see you in the emergency room. You could be days without being seen. Wow. But what if I could catch you before there was a problem? Yeah. And so some people, the people on the prayer line, it's not too late, but, I can probably, the best I can offer them is a better quality of life. But some of us, I can offer us something before we get there. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Preventative. And don't that sound like God? Yeah. And so he had put it on my heart, but that didn't mean I had people trying to get me to move the dates. I said, I'm sorry. I smiled and grinned and said, one thing about it, I grin and say no. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Because when God's giving me something to do, and my parents will tell you about that, when I know that God's giving me something to do, I don't let nothing get in the way of that. That's right. And the thing is, I know it's protected by God, and so I just keep on going, just like Moses. If he tell me to do it, honey, I'm going to keep on going. I keep going. And he always makes a way. He's provided everything I need, but it's to help my community. And my mother always said, God always prepares his people.
Yeah.
So this is my part that I can do, and I'm going to be doing a lot more. I'll let y'all know about that. But helping prepare his people, because I always say he takes what you got. Now, why would he give me an education in nursing and I don't help people?
Right.
That would make no sense. And I know we need it. I know that who these laws are supposed to be affecting.
Absolutely.
So he doesn't give me anything for me just to have it. That's a waste of a resource. And God doesn't waste anything. Not only does he not waste it, he multiplies it.
That's right.
So we'll go to the third question. The leap of faith. Starting a new church takes courage and trust. What fears did you have to confront, and how did obedience outweigh uncertainty?
The fears that I want to do with that specifically, the fears that I face is, number one, not becoming some of the poor examples that I've seen before me. I feel like we're living in a time where people see the negative representation of ministry. And so trying to remain faithful to what God called me to do, but also being alert and aware that people are on edge as it pertains to coming back into church buildings since the pandemic.
Absolutely.
And then with the different scandals and things that are, prevalent on media, they're scared to trust again.
Absolutely.
And so that was one of the things that was really big for me, is how could church feel safe again? And that's one of our mottos, is being a safe place for all people to be saved. Our focus is on salvation, but most importantly, feeling safe.
Absolutely.
With that goes, how can I hear the message and my stomach is growling over the loudspeaker, so meeting the day-to-day needs of the people. And so one of the things that I didn't want to do was just have church. But one of the other fears of mine was, oftentimes, as in Pentecostal churches, we lack sometimes the resources. And so I was like, God, if this is you, make a way. And so the resources and just the partnership, I call it kingdom partnership, of the other local churches that have helped us to get started and to maintain. Anybody knows about ministry knows winter months are hard.
Absolutely.
Because you got more bill than starting church, then you have people.
Absolutely.
And so you're looking like God. And so one of the things that I had to come to the conclusion of, Lord, if it's your will, it's got to be your bill.
Absolutely. That's what
it's got to be your bill. And so those were some of the fears that I had, but overcoming it was just knowing that God called me to it.
Absolutely.
And if he called you to it, he will see
He will provide. I can testify to that. I was just laying in the bed the other night. I keep talking about my community wellness fest, but most of it I'm building with my own money.
Okay.
And even the money that I'm collecting off the vendors is just to leave the church with something. Because my mama taught me that you don't use nothing and don't give them nothing. You hear me? So even the money that I was collecting off of vendors, and the church is still gonna get off. And what you know what I'm saying? Wow. And because you don't use anything, I'm saying I'm gonna stop right here, because some my pastor used to say some things are home training.
Yeah.
And so holistic living, I keep saying holistic. That's where we started. Ideally crazy. We're seeing ourselves through God's eyes, but God, there's no limit to God's resources.
Yeah.
You hear me?
Yeah.
So if he sends you to a place and it's supposed to be not just good for you, but good for them.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't want to go in and use anybody or anything that pertains to anybody else and not give them something.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because why would you do that? One thing is just it's not good etiquette, and two, then God makes provisions for what he tells you to do.
Absolutely.
And so I was telling the Lord, I said, Lord, you know what I'm going through. And what's so crazy is, while I was doing that, I'm going through a little thing with my job, and they had been doing some things at work, and I hadn't been at work this 2 weeks.
Okay.
But I'm using my income from that. And I said, but you know what, Lord? I said, that's just one of my provisions.
Absolutely.
I said, we know that you have several provisions that I don't even know where they're coming from.
Absolutely.
And I know you told me to do it. And when I tell you he's been providing, even with my job, he's been sending money from other places. So when he tells you to do something, I always say the devil just wants to scare you.
Yeah.
So, and that's where fear and anxiety, now fear has a lot of different looks. It looks like anxiety. It looks like anxiousness.
Yeah.
And so it looks like doubt. And so but it's not your job to figure out, just like our pastor here said, Like you put it before the Lord. Lord, this is your bill. And it is.
Yeah.
Because I'm serving your children.
That's right.
And just like my father used to say, if anybody's going to inconvenience you, if your children are going to inconvenience anybody, it might as well be you.
Yeah.
So my daddy, he never rushed. He never told us he did rush. That's not true. But he never told us what he couldn't do.
Yeah.
He always made a way. When he had to show up, he found a way to show up.
Yeah.
And one thing I noticed that if I missed the school bus, he never fussed at me about it.
Wow.
He never, he just took me on, stuff like that. He never fussed at me. He might tell me how to be prepared, but his attitude was always a teach. Like you had wrote a Facebook post, you must teach with love.
Yeah.
And that's so true because how do you build a relationship unless you build it with love?
Yeah.
Because it's not what you said. A lot of times you're working out
understand.
of wrong intentions when you haven't built a relationship with love.
Yeah.
I've seen that. I completely agree with that. But my dad was a perfect example with that. He always teach. I never felt like he was disappointed. So it was easier to tell him the truth.
Absolutely.
And so he would just, show me little things. He would say, well, if you was going to inconvenience anybody, you might as well inconvenience me. And that's how God feels about you. You're not inconveniencing him. Before you got there, he knew. You guys know I like to listen to a lot of Bishop T.D. Jakes, and that's what he said. Once he figured out, for people with anxiety and different things like that, he said once he figured out that God didn't leave not a portion of his life up to chance, that everything he had planned, and then what the scripture goes back and says, I always say, if you want to know God, Pastor Sarah Jakes Roberts says, get to know the character of God. How do we do it? You read your word. Yeah. The more you stay into him, the more you get to know him. You know the will of his life for you and how he truly loved you and how he wants to treat you. But you know that his will is for you to prosper and do well. So you take that. And then it also says a good man's steps are ordered by the Lord. Because sometimes even on this journey, I'm like, Lord, did I do the right thing? Do this. And so even with the job, I had left the job to come to the job that's giving me a hard time. Okay. I left a job that I absolutely loved everything about it, to a job that, honey, I'm not going to lie to y'all. Y'all know how they've been hell on wheels.
Wow.
And I said, and so somebody said to me, well, maybe you should have stayed. And then I went back and thought, because I listen to if I'm not reading, I'm listening to somebody preaching. Or T.D. Jakes said, it's always hard to go uphill. He said, when you ain't having no trouble, you're complacent.
Yeah.
So don't let complacent people tell you. That's why I always stay on her. If you're having a hard time, it's probably, if you're doing something good, you're probably on the right track. Because it's always harder to go uphill than it is to stay still or to do nothing. But guess what? Uphill leads you to what you want. Yeah. So what it was is I was in a position of leadership at the other one, but I really, other than talking and going to see problems, going into church and maybe here and there where there was a dress and change, but my hands-on wasn't a whole lot. And you know what they say, anything that you don't use, you lose.
That's right.
And so what did Rachel just start? First Premier Concierge Nursing, which is concierge nursing business. And so there I go into people's homes. I can put in, if it's ordered, I can put in IVs. I can do all kind of nursing care things that I do, all my skill set. But guess what the new job offered? I got to go back on the floor and build my skill set back up. So even that was the will of God, because one thing, the goal was never to stay at, see, you got to understand your goal too. The goal was, I'm not retiring from no company. That's not the promise of God over my life. I will retire as an entrepreneur.
Wow.
So it don't matter that they give me hell, because that's a part of my journey. That's not a part of my plan.
Absolutely.
You understand?
Absolutely.
And so I had to know this. And listen, some of this advice that you get are going to come from people older than you. You hear me? But that's how you know God has put a special, I've always had that little thing to me, because, just knowing who you are, and some things only God can do for you. Because some stuff I was too little to even have a good understanding. They've always said, as a little girl, I had a really good understanding. But even as a little girl, I remember I was getting in trouble for something, and the people was telling me, "You ain't got a mind of your own." And I said, I didn't say a word because I knew I better. I said, "No, that's why you mad, because I do got a mind of my own." Had I agreed with you, we wouldn't be having no problem. But because I don't agree with you, which let me know then I couldn't have been no more than about 8 years old. But I had enough common sense then that you couldn't bully me into making me stay and think what you want me to think.
That's right.
And so even with this, I always go back to God. You don't have to, when you have a question about stuff, there's no problem with not knowing. But I do take counsel. So that's another thing. So I don't automatically get rid of the information somebody give me, but I go back to God. And when I say I go back to God, I ask them. And after I ask him, either he'll let me come across something in the word, or he'll let me come across something that I'm listening to that, you know how I said he speaks to it and you know what he's saying. You were complacent where you were.
Yeah.
We couldn't have that. I moved you. I'm giving you what you said you wanted.
Wow.
And it's always going to look like a struggle. And Bishop T.D. Jakes says either you going in a battle or you coming out one. So if you don't find if you don't find yourself having to fight, you should be worried, because that means the devil's not worried about you. And the only reason why he's not worried about you is because you're not giving him no problem. And if you're a child of God, you should always be giving the devil a problem, honey.
Right.
I'm gonna be a pain in his side till the Lord brings me home. You hear me? And that's gonna be through not just my mouth. My mouth is a big tool that I use, but that'll be through my service, because you got to live what you speak. I came from a mother who always believed in living what you taught.
Right.
You don't say one thing and live another. Be the person. If you say you have integrity, live with integrity. The people that you come in interaction with should say that, okay, when I've dealt with this person has integrity. Then is everybody going to say that about you? No, because there's always going to be somebody that don't like you for whatever reason. I had somebody telling somebody that I told them to quit school. I said, no, honey, I preach school like I remember my son's father was saying, well, maybe he should get a trade. I said, no, he need to get an education.
Yeah.
I said, I said, it's good to know how to work with your hands, but you get paid more for working with your mind. You hear me? And I wrote on Facebook the other day, I was counseling somebody, not even really meaning to, but consulting somebody. She had worked a 16-hour shift, then had to come to her other job at 1. I didn't see her till 5 and was going back to work at night. I said, listen, you're not going to work your way out of debt.
Wow.
I said, you're going to think your way out of debt. And how do we think our way out of debt? I start telling her how to create different subscriptions and packages for her services that she was given to make more money. And then I said, set a goal. Yeah. So that's the thing. I say that to my community. There's a lot of things coming. And if y'all have read the plan that he has for us, it's not going to be no middle class. Sometimes we say, well, I don't have to be rich. Rich sometimes just means that you're comfortable and can do what you want to do. That's a rich life.
Absolutely.
And you don't have to say you don't need it. God, he done told you he got houses. He ain't talking about in heaven. He said down here he got houses that you didn't build. So you don't have to feel like that you don't have to be without. Say, Lord, show me how to get to it. It says seek him first, and then all these things will be added unto you. So go through him to get it. Learn from that, but learn that God wants to give you more. You know, we want to be a people that can handle, and God prepares our people for that great divide, because we're going to need each other. And so it's more blessed to give than to receive. Do you want to be helping people? Do you want to be in the position? Let's say Joseph had a rough upcoming. You know, his brother sold him into slavery. But when they had that drought, they came back from him. So he could have cried about how he got there. But do you think he don't appreciate that he was able to go back and help his brother?
Wow.
You hear me? Call me Little Joseph. Because I want to be able to help my brother. I want to be able to help my family and definitely my brother. And that's my goal. That's what I said. Read that word, honey, because that's us. That's just us now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That was then. We like to judge him. Oh, I wouldn't do, baby. You do. Not only you doing it, you outdoing them. So read them, read about them, find what you found in the Bible. And one thing I can say, all the people in the Bible, they had a little bit of a rough story.
Yeah.
That's why we see the glory of God. So know that God is not in you. He's in the storm with you. He's not against you. He's in the storm with you. And what God has blessed, no man can curse.
I shared with our church just yesterday. I was saying that when you're in God, you got options.
You got options.
You ain't got to settle. You got options. Yeah. We almost lost control of the service, but that thing blessed us yesterday was talking about you don't have to settle in God. So many times we settle, but we forget that the earth is the Lord's.
The earth
and the
is
fullness.
and the fullness thereof.
It's options.
And you say that, listen, that was magical, because we've been talking about all this education stuff. You've seen with the boards, them closing down schools and stuff like that. Well, that word that you said kind of just linked to a story in my head. So I had sent my daughter Israel to, it's over then because she ain't going back, Johnson Traditional Middle School. And it was a little bit rough of a school, especially. It was a little bit of a culture shock. Israel's a little bit more timid. Okay. She was bullied. She was harassed. It caused problems. It was one thing after another. And honestly, y'all, the school people can't do nothing. A lot of the things are written where their hands are tied. They can't put the kids out of school. So it's on you to do something. And Israel ended up, I remember my parents was writing letters. I had flew into school. The same little girl had been harassing Israel and trying to get Israel to fight. And Israel didn't want to fight, but I always help my children prepare themselves. You know, this may happen. Yeah. So we did everything that we could do. I even flew in in town from Miami to come and meet with the school people to let them know what was going on. We had a plan. The plan didn't work because the teachers wasn't working with it. You know, they're tired. It's 26, and then this was a school that was kind of problematic. You know, and so and it was a traditional school, so things do change.
Wow.
And so the little girl ended up saying one day after the class that she was going to get Israel after the class was over. Israel went up to the teacher. The teacher didn't do anything. Now, what could the teacher do? The teacher could have held Israel back until the bell rang and made the little girl on. What did the teacher do? Nothing. So Israel then, like she said, I waited for everybody to leave. She said, because I wanted somebody to see, you know. So I want y'all to know some of these babies are looking for help and they can't get it. And so I document everything. So nurses believe in documentation. So when I tell you I'm an email selling, I'm an email junkie. And I had documented, met everything because my main goal was to protect my child.
Right.
And what I had did is I had settled because I knew that school wasn't going to be a good school for in the first place. 6th grade, they were out of school. And so I taught her from home in COVID. But I was like, 7th grade, it should be okay. But I knew I didn't want it there. But I settled. And she went into that environment. And because of that, I asked for forgiveness to this day that my child had to go through that because I settled. She ended up having to fight because the little girl came out. But Israel's smart. Look, you can't really outdo it because she's smart. She's just as smart as she is pretty. And what she did, though, she sprayed herself with mace. So she did spray the other girl. But because some of the kids were coughing, Israel had never been in trouble. At that time, she was a 4.0 GPA student. She's a 3.8 GPA student now. She ain't had a teacher that didn't love her.
Wow.
Never been a problem. Even the teachers then never had a complaint. Never been reading. Same thing to this day. So she's never given trouble. But because of how the rules were written, I talked to a black lady that worked up in the Department of Education. And listen to what people are telling you. Sometimes they trying to help you. They not trying to hurt you.
Yeah.
She said, listen, as a mother, she said, I've read your documentation. She said, and I understand what you're saying. She said, but because of how the rules are written up, she said, they were going to try to send her to a bad school. Well, I said, all I knew from the beginning is that my child wasn't going to that kind of school. So that's another thing. I do have what I want to do, honey, and I don't let nothing deter me. I said, she ain't going to one of them schools because she don't deserve to be there.
Yeah.
And so I knew that I had, and I went to the Lord. I said, Lord, should I fight? Because in the Bible, he said, should I go up? I said, should I fight?
Yeah.
I said, should I do something else? Should I stand still and do something different?
Yeah.
And one thing the Lord likes to use with me, he said, why do you keep doing things? And he said that to me recently about something. He likes to use the same phrases with me because I know what it means. He said, why do you keep doing things that aren't what you want? He said, you've got options.
Wow.
So I had the option and the capability of putting my daughter in private school. But no, I didn't want her there. What did I just tell you? I had settled and put her there in the first place.
Yeah.
He said, why do you keep doing things against what you want?
Yeah.
And I said, when you hear the Lord. And so then he let me talk to that lady, and it was clear. She said, I understand what you're saying. Listen to what people saying. She's saying we ain't gonna be able to do nothing to help you. You right. But how the rules are setting up, because these rules are not always right, but the rules are the ruls. And they are in black and white. So I was able to put my daughter into a private school. She had a pleasant experience.
Wow.
We bought her back out after private school and got her because she wanted to go to prom and stuff like that. Yeah. Went to high school. She's had a lovely experience.
Wow.
And so God told me I had options. And in God, you have options.
Absolutely.
And sometimes you don't know that you have options because you keep doing what you don't want. Stop settling. Yeah. So it was 2 messages that you just said. Stop. I had settled. I knew from the beginning it wasn't right for her. I knew what type of child I had, and I knew what type of kids was going there. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And it was everything and worse than what I thought it was going to be, because it's always going to be worse. When you settle, everything in life, when you settle, it's always going to be worse than you thought. Women, when you settle in a relationship, and I can say this, what my daddy said, anything that don't get better gets worse. When you find people and they're not living up to your standard, and that's what you can give, move on. Because they're not going to do nothing but give you less because they slow. You're teaching them not to respect you. You're teaching them that you don't really want what you want.
I shared with the single women in our church yesterday a post that I had saw that said, why do you have to settle when a man died for you?
You heard me?
Why do you have to settle when a man died for you? Why do you have
to settle when a man died for you? And I had an ex that called me And it might have seemed cruel. And he was like, Rachel, please, I just, I need another chance. I want to show you. I said, you don't owe me nothing. I said, and honestly, I think God just wanted me to see my wrongs. And, so I can say, I said, God would never be that cruel.
Wow.
Get to know the character of God. I said, God would never, he would never allow me to be the person that I was to you. And then let you do and not treat me the way that I want. And so I'm not going to lie, men don't treat me bad because I'm not tolerating it. But if you don't treat, what I say is, I don't even worry about what I don't want. I like to be treated well.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I think is well.
Yeah.
My daddy treats me well. My daddy has never yelled, talked crazy to me my whole life. Now, he might get a little fussy, he might get firm sometimes, but when I tell you my daddy has always been gentle with me, even when I'm not so gentle. So what? And this man done changed my diapers. He done had to take care of me when I could do nothing for him. When I could do nothing for my daddy. You hear me? He's always been that man to me. So why would I go? It's a slap in God's face and it's a slap in my daddy's face to go and tolerate something that I know that God don't mean for me to tolerate.
Wow.
And he would never be that cruel because he know the same type of person that the reason why you want to come back is because I was a good person. So he wouldn't allow you to do me like that and then me come back and then no. God wants me to have somebody that treats me and sees me through his eyes, that loves me. I seen a little post the other day said Rachel was not, because my name really does come from the Bible. My daddy's name is Robert, so he could choose two our names. He had to choose our name, but it could not. My mama told me it could not be Rebecca, so that's how it became Rachel. But Rachel was chosen and cherished. So I said, anything don't look like not just being chosen, because I get chosen a lot. But if I'm not chosen and cherished, then you ain't from God, and I don't want nothing that's not from Him. You hear me?
Yeah.
Marriage and ministry. As a husband in ministry, how do you intentionally protect and nurture your marriage while serving a growing church and community?
Wow. So one of the things, I hope y'all don't stop following the page when I say this, but one of the things I told my wife from the very beginning is that first lady is not biblical; it's political.
It is political. It is.
And
political.
so, and I share that with her. I said, your first ministry is me.
Okay.
And you're my first ministry.
Absolutely.
You're my priority. And so
Absolutely.
So one of the ways I protect her definitely is in our marriage is definitely the order.
Absolutely.
God, family, church. And so I said, this is our first year, but I let our church know yesterday. This was our past. We just celebrated 33 years. And so I said,
congratulations.
Going forward, I said, we will not be in church our anniversary Sunday. So this is the first year. We laid the foundation still. I said,
but you would say sometimes, that's why I said we're playing. Sometimes you don't know until you do that. We don't do it that way again.
We're not going to be doing that. But so one of the allowing her to be herself and not what people expect her to be. Not what people expect her to be. Not what somebody else is saying a first lady should be, but who is she?
Who is she?
So that's
absolutely. I agree 100% with that because it's biblical.
Yeah.
Why do you agree? Because it's biblical. God says charity starts at home.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a man and woman, a married couple, they're one.
Absolutely.
So how could she not be your priority? How could you not be her priority?
Absolutely.
If he's a man of God. So he has to do it in that order because that's how God has directed. Sometimes we have questions and He's already answered them.
Yeah.
That's why somebody was telling me, somebody said, well, He's already somewhere, somehow, there's something in that word that's pertaining to the problem. He didn't leave nothing out. And so we talk about sometimes there's books of the Bibles that has been left out. But I promise you, somewhere, because the Bible repeats itself basically over and over and over again. Somewhere in that word, there's something pertaining to what God has said and your need of that response. Yeah. And so, again, read your word. And then also and I love that you let your church know, this is my part, because they need to know that. Sometimes you have members who don't know the word of God.
Absolutely.
And as a leader, that's what you do.
Absolutely.
You're sharing them. I'm sharing with you order, because in God, there's always order from every little thing. And when you get out of order, that's when we start to see people have problems. Yeah. And so, yes, your wife is your priority, and so is she. And even when you called her, it was so cute. They got a baby. Anything under 6 is a baby.
Oh, he's 2.
2. So I look all the way up to 6. I'll be calling him a baby. Yeah. But they had a baby, and baby was calling. I said, wait till he start texting. I said, my little girl used to send just pages of emojis. But even their communication, that's what's important, because The main part is letting each other know what's up, you know, and knowing that you are each other's priority.
Absolutely.
And that's something you kind of have to start off with, you know, from the beginning, especially if your intentions for that person is to be in your life for long run. That person has to be a priority.
It's imperative that you show people how to treat your wife.
Absolutely.
Because you don't just honor me and look past my wife.
Exactly.
And again, going back to what I said earlier, sometimes I saw so many examples that didn't line up to that, and I saw the strain. You know, I saw the strain. You know, you could tell. You know, when there were struggles in the household. You know, they didn't honor their wife. That Sunday. Oh, we jumping quickly to the word of God. No, you know, and so create a culture of honor. It starts with me and how I treat her and how I don't let nobody else treat her. You know, if there's something my wife, you know, I gotta tell her all the time, there is no blueprint for the first lady in this church. I said, so you're establishing what the next pastor's wife would do. You know, you're establishing a culture now. But I said, so as you're growing, we call it, our Bible study is called Growing in Grace.
Absolutely.
So I said, as you're growing in grace, I said, you look to the older first ladies, that, you know, those who's been in that, you know, capacity for a while. I said, but you don't have to mimic
them.
You don't have to mimic them, you know, because the Bible tells us to make disciples, not clones.
Exactly.
Not clones. And so I said, your first job is be what I need you to be.
And absolutely. And like you said, to make the, you know, disciples are not clones.
Yeah.
Well, if you completely mimic what you see, then you could miss your calling. You could miss your purpose because God, he has a different plan for each of us.
Absolutely.
So I completely agree with that. Legacy and family. As a father and pastor, what values are you most intentional about passing on to your children? And what kind of legacy do you hope your family and church carry forward?
The number one thing with that question is, I'm really big on not just being good at doing church, but being good at doing life.
Absolutely.
There's a story in 2 Kings, the 4th chapter, about a woman, a widow, who was left in debt from her husband. But the Bible calls him Elisha's servant. So that shows us he was serving well, but he left his family in debt.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I'm really big on sharing that with our church on how to make sure you take care of business.
Absolutely.
We shouldn't be having a GoFundMe and selling fish dinners to bury you.
Absolutely.
I'm intentional about that because I've seen it done. I've seen it done. I've seen, you know, the church got a van, but your car being repossessed.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
we got to be good at doing life together,
Absolutely.
and not just doing church. So I encourage our members, if you got, you know, activities going on with your kids, go to that. The church will be here. That's what we got live stream for.
And that's what it's supposed to be.
Catch the replay. Catch the replay. And so that's something that I'm big on, being good at doing life.
And that is so important. That's one of the discussions I have with my dad quite often, is that, like, sometimes I love my church home. But I didn't feel like it really prepared me for real life. It prepared me to just be there, but God didn't call me to just be there. But I still got everything I needed. So even with that, and so what it was is, even in that, it taught me, like I said, going back, what do I want to bring back to my community, and not just my church, but within the whole community. Because you have to be good at doing life. You know, you have to leave church. I seen a lot, you know, one thing I said, most of the women that were married in the church, I said, none of them were happy. I said, if you kind of watched them, I said, they weren't happy. I said, and so I never wanted that.
And a lot of their husbands wasn't saved.
Look,
but they put that pressure on us, to marry somebody within church, and I understand why, because they didn't have it. But a lot of those households were but they was in it for years.
You know what? My daddy never told me to do that, and I never was gonna do it. You know, and I never was gonna do it. Matter of fact, I've never dated anybody within the church. I'm like, I may have talked to one guy, but it was nothing. But the thing is, like, he taught me to look at a man based on his works. So because a lot of times you can be in the church, but being in church doesn't mean that you're saved. Being in church, even if you call yourself saved, I've learned the hard way. Just because you're in the church don't mean you have integrity.
Yeah,
You know, so
absolutely.
I'm looking on the character of a man, because when we ain't in church, we at home.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
I'm not, I'm not taking no beating, so it means I'm a fighter. I ain't got time to go to jail. I got a license.
Yeah,
You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? So there's certain things that I just knew that I wasn't gonna tolerate, and I couldn't go through, because that's not what I wanted to do. Even growing up, one thing that my dad never, even when me and my brother would get into it with each other, we could never just talk to and say anything we wanted to each other. So from children, we were taught how to communicate with the people that we live
Yeah.
with, because that's what my dad said. He said, if you can't get along with nobody else, you ought to be able to get along with the people that you live
That's
with.
good.
So I always knew that it was going to be important that I get along with my spouse.
Yeah.
And I've never lived with a man, but even when God blesses me with a husband,
Yeah.
but it was going to be important to be able to get along with my spouse and at home. So I completely understand doing life. Like you said, people, they're faithful and serving, but they don't have,
Yeah.
they don't have money to bury themselves. So, with the wellness, for what I tell you, is a holistic approach. We got someone coming in talking about insurance, even
Yeah.
burial insurance,
Yeah.
that you can literally do like a layaway plan for your
And I
burial.
think for me, it was, I emphasize that now because I didn't always emphasize it, because I was church. And I didn't realize it. I'm like, wait, I'm missing out on life.
Life, yes.
Like,
Same thing.
there are times when we have services now where we'll do just strictly stream. Spend time with your
Spend time with your family.
I work for a church as a minister of music. I work for Fifth Street Baptist Church.
Okay.
And so like twice a year for a whole month, I cancel all rehearsals.
Okay.
Like really Thanksgiving going into Christmas.
Okay.
Because that's
Give me
time.
time.
Spend time with your family.
And you can
This
sing
church
some
go-
old. Listen.
Right. Or we could sing out this book.
You heard me? You can
You
sing
know?
it. And that's, honey,
Yeah.
I be trying to tell my daddy, I be like, y'all sing the same songs y'all been singing for the last 20
Yeah,
years.
like,
Y'all be
I-
okay, and it
yeah.
don't sound no better.
Yeah.
You hear me?
That part.
And because him and my mom, sometimes they fuss a little bit about them Christmas decorations.
Yeah.
You got time, you got to make it. One thing I did say to him, I said, there was a saying that I heard that said, privilege isn't given, it's taken. And so God has given us privilege, but in this world, you're going to have to take it.
Yeah.
You're going to have to take the land.
Yeah.
So, people are always going to have, and realize what your most valuable asset is, your time.
Yeah.
Time is something that no matter how wealthy you are, how powerful you are, you can't buy more and get more time.
That's right.
And so you have to use that in everything that you do. There are always going to be people that want to tell you what to do with your time.
Absolutely.
I think that they know what you should be doing with your time, but you have to take the privilege of knowing that, like you said, I have God, family, and then church.
Yeah.
You have to know that, and you have to apply that to everything. If it's time to be spending time with your family, there are certain times that it's one, and every family needs that. It's almost, to me, I always say it's almost like a revival for a family.
Yeah.
The holidays or something like that.
Yeah.
And vacations
That's
are
good.
and vacations or something like that.
Yeah.
And we don't have it all the time, do we? No,
Right.
it's just once a year.
Yeah, yeah.
So you know that you need. Now, what do you have that you don't have? You can't drive a car and you don't have to change the oil or put gas in it. What do you have in life that you don't have to take care of or put a little bit more, extra attention to it at some point in time?
That's even with the snow days. Like
Yeah.
here recently, we did have church a week past because of snow days, and I had all our kids. We all just stayed in one room. We got a 4-bedroom house, and we all in one
same
room
room,
playing Uno. And even when they was on their devices, it was just something about being in that
Being the
same
same,
state.
knowing each other,
Hey,
sir.
what's going on with you? This was time that I felt like was really intentional by God, a setup. To get closer with, because sometimes I've said that I felt like we was closer during the pandemic. And so sometimes
together.
I love how God has been orchestrating things since then, because it's almost like there's been intentional shutdowns.
Downs.
Yeah, for times for you to open up and get closer to your family.
Absolutely. And even I'm going to build on to that. And even that's for a reason, because all the things that are coming.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
He's teaching us to
Get close.
get close and closer together.
Yeah.
We're going to have to stay together, because in times of struggle, what happens? Honey, it's a war zone within the family.
Yeah.
So what God does, he constantly prepares his people.
right.
You hear me? And in so many, in infinite ways. But
Yeah.
like you said, since COVID, I love to spend time with my family and
Yeah.
my kids. My daddy is the happiest when we all underneath this roof here.
Wow.
When you want to, because he knows where everybody is and everybody's
That's right.
okay. You hear me?
That's right.
So I probably could be married and be like, honey, can we go to my dad's house? We can
Weekend,
say,
yeah.
See? And he'd be happy. Like, he don't care what you do.
Yeah.
He just like knowing you there and that you say,
Yeah.
because he knows what's going on there. And then look, my husband would be a helpmate to
Right.
to him. And so that's the thing. Like God has been so intentional, and we don't want to waste any of the resources. And I appreciate people saying the things that you're saying, because you don't even know it, that like there may have been pastors and preachers that always did it, but from where we came from, they really didn't work in that order.
Yeah.
They thought that they were putting
Church.
God second if they
Yeah.
didn't put the church first.
Yeah.
And God is in everything.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, your God told you to put family first. He said charity starts at home.
Yeah.
So he had already had a scripture where you had a question, you just didn't understand it. So it's important that that pastors hear the words that you are sharing. Are people that are going into discipleship are becoming a pastor, because they're going to want to know order, and that's going to be a question that you probably run into all the time. Like, okay, how do I prioritize this and that?
And so it's never a 50-50 split. It's always going to be 100-100. There are times where I have to tell my wife, hey, I gotta lock in. And then there's times where I'm telling the church, I gotta lock in.
That's right.
And so but I felt like this first year was very critical. Like my oldest daughter, Genesis, I missed kind of a couple of her games.
Okay.
Because she's cheering now. She's older, so but this first year was so critical. It's like, I can't make that, but I made sure I was at her parade.
You heard me?
We was out there in that parade, cold.
But you knew you was there.
But she knew I was there, and that was important, create that memory. Because growing up as a kid, my mom, it was a time when we came to Kentucky, she was in ministry, but there was times when she wasn't.
Okay.
My mom battled with alcoholism.
Okay.
So she wasn't always at everything.
Okay.
And so that was kind of intentional with me, but sometimes I found out that I was drowning myself out with church, especially in my previous marriage, trying to drown myself out with church to keep from facing reality. But when church was over, reality was still there.
It's always going to be there.
It was still there.
And I think it was a problem when I was growing up. They was coming, like I said, and you could tell they were miserable.
Yeah.
And I said, sometimes they said we was waiting on the Lord. But what I've learned in my,
they didn't want to go home.
They didn't want to go home. Because what I've learned in my adulthood, and that's why it's important to go out and try the churches. It don't take God long.
It don't.
You wasn't waiting on God. He was waiting on you.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you didn't want to admit that. And you didn't want to come.
Well, sometimes because they was miserable at home too, they came to church and took it out.
They took it on. They came to church and took it out on the folks.
You ain't got no power at home, so you flex your authority at church.
And that's exactly what it is. Because when people are at peace at home, it follows you. You can't be two different people. My mother has always said that you cannot be two different people. That's why your character matters so much, because if you're a peaceful person, you're peaceful when you come out. Otherwise, it's going to stress. Let somebody stress you out at church. And like you said, you're going to see it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the thing is, doing life, being intentional about the things you make. And I think some of the things that we went through, like, it made me be more intentional about things. I said with travel, we would travel, but it was always church related.
Yeah,
and I thank God, because some people didn't get to go anywhere. But my dad would get there, and as the minister of music, he still owed a $4,000. I got a $4,000 offering.
Report.
And you got your whole family here. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's a big city, and the bigger the city, the more everything costs. And so you done spent your $4,000, and that ain't nothing about nowhere. And here's the thing: I do believe it takes money to do things.
Absolutely.
But sometimes it can get out of control.
Absolutely.
So I do believe, and I believe that you give, but when your congregation should reflect the way that they give, because God never lets you outgive them.
Yeah.
So if the only person in the church is rich is the pastor, there's a problem
I say
somewhere.
in our church, nobody should be able to pull up to our parking lot and be able to tell which car is the pastor's.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I'm not against pastors having nice things.
There's two nice things,
but everything that comes to flow, yes.
One of the things I was very intentional with was before launching was going and sitting at the feet of older pastors.
Absolutely.
In the city, especially here, we have a lot of great pastors in various denominations. But one thing stayed common, and that was don't live above your people. Yeah, your people should be able to reach you and be touchable. And one of the things, if we grew up here in the city, there's a certain culture that we have here, and so that celebrity pastor mindset don't really work here. It don't work
we
here.
Southern.
You gotta be able to connect and touch with the people,
uh-huh.
and realize, if you're asking for something, let them see where it's going.
Exactly. And not only that, I always say that the blessing don't stop at the top.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It don't stop at that. So if you're wondering, like, if is
Absolutely.
because here's the thing, as the pastor learned, and I'm not putting people down because I
Yeah.
don't do that.
Yeah.
I don't believe that God sends his own to take down his own. So I always
That's
want to make
right.
sure
That's
that
good.
he does not do that. And
Yeah.
that's even biblical. He
Yeah.
wouldn't. Saul was trying to kill David.
Yeah.
And he told him what?
Yeah.
Don't touch him.
Don't touch him.
So I don't believe that God sends me to condemn his own. He takes care of it. It ain't none of my business. And I don't want it to be none. I'm just saying my opinion.
Absolutely.
You understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And so the thing is, I say, when you get, because sometimes it's me really trying to help you with problems that I've seen my family have. You know what I'm saying?
Same here.
You know what I'm saying? So if you don't see the money flowing down, he don't stop blessing at the top. Somebody's not doing right with that with the money. And the thing is, because God's a multiplier, and it don't take God a long time to multiply.
Yeah.
So if you seeing years after years, something ain't right somewhere.
But if your people are coming, and I found myself running that, your people are coming, they sow and they giving their hard-earned money, and when they come to the church to ask for help, there's no help.
Yeah.
There's a question.
There's a question.
As I say all the time, there's a flag on play. There's a flag on play.
Especially when that's where they're supposed to be able to go to help, because that's what it's for. And go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'll say one of the things I'm big on is I don't want to ever be a church that we just pay our bills.
Absolutely.
And so even in our now going on 6 months of existence, we've been able to help families.
Yeah.
We've been able to be a blessing to other churches.
People,
and we're a baby church.
You heard me?
We're a baby church.
But you know why? What did you just say?
Yeah.
Why did God bless you? What did he just say? You want to be blessed, help somebody. Ain't that what I keep telling y'all?
Yeah.
You want to be blessed. What one of our pastors used to say is, when your hands are like this, you can't get nothing in and you can't get nothing out. So the way to be blessed is to give.
Yeah.
I always say that I tell the Lord, I said, whatever you give to me, I will multiply it and give back to. I said, so, like you said, yes to your will, yes to your way, and yes, I'm going to share.
Yeah.
So anything that I have, and I just try, like I said, even with this type of information, I try to make sure that I do it in a respectful way, but it's still in a way of being intentional of helping you to make good decisions, because the Bible also says a good man leaves his children an inheritance.
That's right.
And the only way that you do that is you're going to have to start thinking different, which changes the way that you, the interventions that you take. So what you do. And so that'll cause you to look for ways of, maybe going back to school, or the way that you invest, because there's a lot of investments that you can make to help. I always say that, that money that you give to church, a lot of these churches, they have things that they invest in to bring in the church. So they not just relying. So sometimes when y'all dog in church, well, how do they get this money? They have different ways of bringing money in. They not just building off y'all tax. Especially, y'all know some of y'all don't pay them.
Yeah.
They not just using
I
your
still work
money.
as a musician.
Yeah, they still work. That's what I
I'm a musician, a producer, songwriter. And
I said a lot of these pastors, they was gonna have money regardless. Because why would God put somebody who's not good? A pastor is a leader.
Yeah.
So how can he lead you in ways like that, and he's not good at doing it himself?
Yeah.
And so that's the thing, that there's ways that they multiply their money, and they're able to have financial advisors. There's a church that I have been visiting, and I think I'm going to make it my home church. But what they do is, they have all kind of resources that I like. They had behavioral health therapists, pretty much anything that you need that they have. And that's with them being intentional or trying to give back. And that's what we love about churches. And like he said, even though he's a baby church, his church hasn't been around that long. What did he go in and start doing? He's giving, he's helping. So he knows that God's going to give him more. There's a man that I was listening to this one testimony, because even in business, I listen to people of faith and good character and integrity. And what it was, that he had took his company on this big, beautiful retreat, and it was out of the country. He said, but when I was first getting started, I gave. And the Lord told me, he said, you don't have much now. He said, but give what you have.
Yeah.
So every time, there are things that I can give, and what I give what I can.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so God keeps multiplying and giving me ways to give more. But even with that, I use common sense. I have a lot of people who. Now, one thing about me is my mother, she'll just keep doing and doing and doing. She don't watch how you treat her. Rachel's not really like that. You know what I'm saying? I'm not really like that. If I'm sharing your information and I'm, and I'm supporting you, then I start off and I'll keep doing it for a while, but I do stop, because one thing nurses do is we assess. We sit back. We don't, because we call it evaluating.
Yeah.
So evaluation is really just our second assessment. How's it going? Now, why would I keep supporting somebody? And I ain't gonna go against you, and I ain't for you. But I have people that I promoting me.
That's right.
So why would I not help them? And you sitting back not doing nothing? That don't make no sense, because when it comes to that, it should be a two-way street.
Absolutely.
So that's the difference in me. Because one time my mom was like, well, she had a friend was like, well, Rachel didn't share. I said, well, what did she share of mine?
Yeah.
I've been sharing her for over a year. You hear me? So when I tell you, it ain't just 1, 2, or 3 times. I keep it going. But one thing Rachel gonna do is sit back and evaluate.
Yeah, and I do this. I do the same, especially since I've built a platform on social media. I think I'm at 22,000 followers on Instagram.
Okay.
On Instagram, and so I'm very intentional about who I share and who I show on the platform that I'm building.
Exactly.
You know, but in the same token, it's like it's got to be a two-way street.
It has to be a two-way. It has to be a two-way street, because that's how God meant for things to
Yeah.
go. So
Yeah.
everything has its purpose, and so I know that if I know that I've started off the right way, then there ought to be a benefit. But that's also a decision made in wisdom, because it's like, there's no harvest here.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Yeah.
And so even with that, that's, biblical. Get to know
What
your
you're
God.
producing.
You know what I'm saying? Get to know your God, and you'll know how he means for you to work and how to do things. Because sometimes it's not, the spirit ain't there, or it's not time.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to be promoting those things. And what I loved about, being in the church, there was a bishop, I think it was Bishop Owens. I'm not really sure, but he was in Chicago when I was a little girl. And what it was, he was a big community person, and he would help, like, if their sons got locked up and stuff, he could go down and talk to the judges. He had really good relationships. But he would have a lot of people that didn't even go to his church, didn't invest in church, and he would help some of them. But it got to the point where he said, listen, he said, my favor is reserved for my church members. You hear me?
Yeah.
Because eventually there is a limit on some things.
Yeah.
Now, why would you? It's just like a bank. You wouldn't have planned, not people in their right mind. You wouldn't plan to go to an ATM and pull something out and you ain't made no deposit.
That's right.
People are more important than money.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't, anything that you haven't invested in or even tried to invest in, then why should you be expecting a withdrawal? So you want to think about all things like that. And one thing, it'll keep you in the role of doing what you're supposed to do. I don't do it to, assess other people. I do it so I'm assessing Rachel. Rachel, are you giving and doing like you want people to give and do for you? You hear me? So I'm not saying that, they don't. Rachel, are you giving and doing to the point where, like you would want to be treated? What's your grandma to the golden rule? Yeah. Treat others like you want to be treated. Don't leave nothing. That's one thing the Lord told me when I started getting into my business stuff. He said, you're not going to leave nothing behind. He said, use all that I've shown you, all that you know. So all those things the mothers told me, all the things that the preachers word, and even the things that I heard, use it, because information is one of the most valuable things that you have. So I done kept you long enough. I want to thank you. I want you to tell your church where it's located so that people can come and visit
Greater
you.
Grace Christian Fellowship. We're located on 1143 South 36th Street in Louisville, Kentucky. And our worship begins at 4:15 p.m. with prayer.
Okay, and if you have anything else that you want to, especially, okay.
Just thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you so much for coming, Pastor Badger, and I look forward to all the things that you have. He's also kind of comical. I like to laugh, so there's been a couple of things on Facebook. That's what kind of made him stand out. One thing about me, I like to laugh. I'm real silly, so I like to laugh. So I like a comical, because even the pastor that I was looking to Sunday, he was funny, like toward the end of his message, and the people appreciate that humor. Laughter is good for them, so I don't want no pastor that's too serious. You hear me? It's like a medicine.
They told me growing up, they said nobody's going to take your ministry serious because you play so much.
They take you serious because it's real life. People appreciate it. You hear me? So I did appreciate that. That was one of the things that stuck out.
Some people have a hard time adjusting and warming up to ministries who ain't transparent and not willing to laugh and enjoy life.
Because life, you might as well laugh. But I know God probably sits back and laugh. So you might as well laugh at it, because why be that uptight about stuff that even if we didn't know it was going to come up or happen, you know who knew God.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate that. And I appreciate you guys for coming and watching today. Until the next time, I love you and have a good one.
Be blessed.